fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren. Mr. Dave Martino is in the room.
I am here. I've crawled up from the basement of the House of Mystery.
Yeah, they let you out for once in a while.
Yeah.
Call you Igor. Igor.
Yes, that's right.
Igor.
Master.
Yeah. That's the way I like my men. Master. That's the way. Behave.
That's the way.
You know. What was exciting today? So fall, what have you done? Have you done your pumpkin lattes or any of that pumpkin stuff yet? Or what's going on?
I had a Halloween pizza.
Yeah. Yeah, does that mean there's pumpkin on it?
No.
Oh.
No.
But then it's just
Have you had pumpkin lattes?
No. I had one. What I did was I ordered a cold brew. How's that?
Oh.
Cold brew pumpkin, and it was okay.
Oh.
But the exciting thing for me was Count Chocula cereal.
Oh, it's back?
It's back.
Oh.
Yeah, I got 3 boxes.
That's awesome.
That's
It's not
really
like
easy.
Monster Mash, right?
No, you see, no, because last year they didn't have it. Last year they mixed all 3 of them. They had Frankenberry, Count Chocula, and Blueberry all mixed in one box. It was just awful.
It sounds it.
It's the worst mess they could have ever done. I hope someone got fired. Anyway, so it was exciting. I got the real stuff, and it's probably the worst thing for me, but you know somebody's got to do it.
Can you taste again?
No.
No.
No, I still can't taste. I'm starting to smell coffee a little bit, but there's still no flavor, so I'm saving it. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I see. Yep.
I've got the boxes sitting there on standby, and they're waiting for that second, but maybe it'll never happen. Yeah, I don't know. Well, now speaking of the Count, we've got the Count with us today. The Count of something. Horror. Not horror writer. So, and we're going to talk about his writing, and we're going to talk about, I guess, the latest book that he's got called Throwing Shadows. So, Mr. Jerry Roth, thank you for sitting in here with us.
Thank you. And I'm glad to be on here with you. And first off, I'm not a Count Chocolate guy, but I am a Frankenberry guy. So I get that every year. That's my go-to.
Well, I like Frankenberry too. Don't get me. I do. I can do both, but the store only had Count Chocula.
Oh, okay.
And last year they had that Monster Mash.
That was bad.
That's just gotta be, someone should be actually shot for this.
I think they are. I think it was in the papers for a while there that, an executive was, quartered for that. But yeah, that was a bad one. We had that last year too, and we were so disappointed. So we're back to the good stuff now.
Yeah, what kind of a mess was that? That was terrible. Anyway, I mean, someone deserves prison. Let's see, where did you come from? The bottoms of Ohio. Awful place. So I can see why you write horror.
The dregs of humanity. No, I live out in the country of Ohio, which is kind of I don't know, that's an oxymoron or something. So yeah, I live in Ohio. I actually live in a 1908 Catholic church that we converted to a family home. So I'm not only a horror writer, I'm living the horror lifestyle over here in Ohio.
Wow. Is there any bodies in the basement or something? Or do you have ghosts or something like that?
Bodies that we put in there or from the previous owner?
Well, we don't have to admit that, but just if there's bodies there.
No, nothing so grotesque, unfortunately. But a lot of inspiration, in an old Catholic church.
Or do you hear people walking around at night, noises and stuff like that? You hear someone's praying at night, or?
We do. And so that must be a normal thing when you think of an old church, because we hear footsteps above us all the time and we're like, okay, we'll just move on with our day.
That's kind of really, I'm just thinking about this. That's really kind of scary in a sense that, that, because now they're discovering all those, children's bodies in all the churches there, the Catholic churches throughout Canada now. There's been 3 or 4 now where they've discovered 70 or 80 bodies of, because what they did was the government allowed the church to, take Aboriginal, like First Nations children,
right,
from the natives, and they would take them because they were going to teach them how to be a good Christian and not a savage. That was the thinking. So they took them and they would put them in these Catholic schools, and of course, they grow up and they send them out in the world, right? And a lot of these kids went missing or were never heard from again, or whatever. There's all sorts of stories for years and years. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, in the first one they found, the first school, they found 120 bodies of children. And now there's been 3 or 4 now where they've found similar. So and they would have never known. It's accidental. And now the Pope was just in Canada apologizing.
So they were, I'm guessing they were backsliding Christians at some form. They didn't make the cut. I don't know.
Well, there's all sorts of, you see, this leads to rumors, because now nobody knows, because, you don't have the records of the church. And the government didn't really do it. They just said, oh yeah, well, what better to take these savage kids and send them to church, and then they'll learn the right way. So what they were doing with these children, there's the story that there was probably some sort of virus or some sort of thing that happened, or disease. But the thing is, why would it only hurt the Indian children and not the white children?
That's true.
Right. And then there's now the latest rumor I've heard is that they were doing experiments on these children, sort of like, for testing different diseases and viruses out and cures. And they were using these kids for that. Again, that's rumor. There's no fact to this.
That's
just
crazy.
Yeah.
Was the name of this church Pfizer by any chance?
Now I'm not saying that.
Okay, I'm starting to hear some inference here. So
yeah, no, not at all. Actually, Bill Gates. No, it was actually no. For the most part, there really is none in that sort of way. Because remember, back even in the U.S., they were trying out different things on black men, like the Tuskegee Airmen and stuff. They were trying different. Right. They would inject them with things and then see what. So it's kind of along those lines. Not that it was a particular vaccine or company like that, health company, because I don't think they were that prevalent back then either. No. It was more of a government agent of some sort. I'm
glad we live in the safe times of 2022 then.
Oh, please. Oh my God. I tell you, I couldn't live a saner life than I do now. But yeah, so anyway, so I wonder, because that always leads you to think, well, I wonder where else this is going on, right. maybe churches in America. So maybe where you are now.
Well, it's definitely interesting because we have a crawl space under the structure of our home. So we have to do repairs once in a while, and me and my son go under there. They bury there's all the way up to the top of the crawl space, there's a pile of dirt, that makes it a crawl space. But you can, as you go into the back of the church, you can actually see a little part of the back of an archway, of a doorway, just the top. But the rest of it is buried. So my son wants to unbury it and see if it's, if there's an actual level below and where this little doorway leads. So I was like, he can do that when he takes over the house. I don't think I'm ready for that.
Yeah. Wow. You just never know.
No.
I don't know what's going on. So, but where does this come from for you? Like you're writing in this style of writing that's horror and kind of dark in that. So what happened in your life to make you be so dark? Like, do you have a vampire for a father?
I love that that's the question. Is what's wrong with you?
What's well, and I didn't say it that way. I just said, remember, not wrong. I said, what happened to you? You see, because personally, I was brought up with a vampire, so I understand this life. So I'm just wondering, like, were your parents witches and vampires and?
You know what? I was born, I was born in the 70s and grew up in the 80s. So there was, even as much as you can say it was a politically correct time, it seemed like the movies and the TV shows and the things you watched were definitely a lot looser. My parents, we watched whatever our parents watched. There was no kid shows back then for me, So if my parents were watching a scary movie, guess what? All the kids were watching a scary movie too. So we had a kind of different outlook on life, I guess, back then than we do now. Now, you put your kids in front of a purposeful, Disney movie or a cartoon. But I was kind of brought up watching horribly scary movies and maybe, some things that I shouldn't have seen. So one of my first memories was watching The Exorcist at probably 5 or 6. Not that I understood much, but those are the kind of things that kind of influenced me early on and kind of, it showed me that there were more to life than just, the romper room that was around or Captain Kangaroo or whatever was at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So long as you didn't mix the two.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think they do that nowadays. I think there's a kids game where you're in a Chuck E. Cheese fighting for your life. So I think they've even moved beyond where I was as a kid.
Yeah. Well, that's good, I think. But nice. So okay. So you were brought up in a way that you were seeing scary things from a young age that adapts you. You get very normalized in that way. Right. But but what made you think that you could write?
That's a good question. I think especially writing, maybe art in general, you kind of know early on. It seems like anybody who has any kind of creative spark, they're informed, internally at a young age. And I remember when I was a kid, I would bring friends over and I would tell them stories. Even when before I could read, I was reading or pretending to read my books and making up stories to, either scare them or freak them out or even just entertain them. So, and even years later when I was in elementary school, I was the guy that would be telling the stories on the bus on the way there and the way back. And if I could frighten them or scare them or get them excited about my stories, then it was a win.
Wow. So you were like a real mean kid.
I did have a mean streak, but I've transitioned into writing it and down, and so that I can be more friendly.
Yeah, you were going around making kids cry on this.
And it wasn't hard back then.
They believed anything. It's crazy. So let's talk about your first book then. So when was the first time that you actually got a book out there for people to read and kind of what's your experience with that?
Yeah, definitely. I'll tell you that story. I'm a late bloomer. I guess like if you were in the entertainment business, somebody would like Rodney Dangerfield would have been a late bloomer to the entertainment business. And I started a family and I work at a pharmacy. So I wrote things and I put them in a drawer for many years. Of all years, 2020, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna test the waters. So I sent it out to, and the very first person I sent it out to, which was Sunbury Press, they immediately signed me up. They said, yeah, we like your story. And that book was called Bottom Feeders. And it's about a prison warden in Ohio. He's a young guy, youngest guy ever to become a prison warden in the town. And the first day on the job, he opens up a drawer and he finds a diary. And the diary says, written by the last prison warden, says that he found the devil and that he put him underneath the prison and, don't release him. So that's like the starting point off of my book. So it's definitely a horror base, and it's very scary. So that was kind of my entry into writing, and it was a strange time because 2020 was the worst time that you could even want to be a published author. Everything was locked down. I had no way of even doing book events or signings. So it was a weird, boy in a bubble kind of experience for my first novel.
Yeah, it would be. And so when you take a story like that and you put it in there, did you have a point to that story? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you write horror, most of the characters, they suffer, unfortunately, to the writer's delight usually. But what I really was trying to get at with the story is that we're all kind of, because it's set in a prison, but all the characters are really, they're kind of stuck in their own prison. Maybe it's their mind, or it's their way of life, or maybe their childhood. So they're all trying to battle against, a battle against nature, battle against the things that usually will keep you down, but with horror elements involved.
Well, when you do that, and you say writing and suffering characters and stuff like that, how do you attack something like that? How do you yourself get into the mind of someone that's suffering? Because you put them in a position where they're, let's say, suspense or fear is going on, I'd imagine.
Right.
And so with that, how are you able to write it to make it so that it feels real?
Yeah, I think, when I started out my career, before I ever became a novelist, I started out writing screenplays. That was kind of my enjoyment on my off time. And, when you do a screenplay, whether you know or not, you sort of, it's a bare bones thing, because you put in very little, description on the page so that you can fill it out, and let the director take over. But after I did that, I did a couple of screenplays, and when I turned to a novel, I was just so excited that I was actually able to use so many more words and so much more narrative and atmosphere and description, so that, when I make a character and I put them on the page, they start out a blank slate, really. I don't know any more about that character than the reader would. And I let that character kind of live and breathe on the page and evolve. And I kind of add more challenges to the point where you kind of get a full story and background about the character and kind of understand them, and they can truthfully come to life by the end of the novel, hopefully.
Did you find it difficult to transition from that bare bones screenplay writing to writing prose fiction?
The transition was easy when it came to the writing. The writing was not the problem. The problem is letting the pages take their time. When you're doing a screenplay, you're doing a scene and you're putting all the good stuff right there and on each page, because you only have so many pages to use. The hard part was letting it kind of, let it marinate, let it kind of stretch out for 300 pages. That's really what the challenge is. I mean, unless you're talking about a writer like Stephen King that writes, 600-page novels or, 1,100-page novels. But for most of us, just giving people little hints and clues as you go along, but still keeping the reader interested, but letting it drag out. I think that's really where the challenge is.
Stephen King, he writes horror.
I heard the name once, so.
Okay. I can't find him on Amazon either, so I guess maybe he's not doing that well.
I think he retired a couple years back.
Oh, gave up. Hey, nobody would buy him, and I know about that. Well, and how's it when you write the evil character again? When you're writing in the mind of someone evil, do you enjoy having people suffer, and so you like being the evil character?
See, I've listened to your show and I've heard you ask others this question before. So either you're part psychiatrist or I don't want to lead the witness, but Yeah, there is, that's like the best part of us to explore is all the things we're not allowed to say. Most people, they say, please tell me what I'm not allowed to say so I can say it. And in a way, that is what when you're writing a really evil character or a really despicable person, or even a good character that's doing some really, atrocious things. That's the fun part. You can step outside. Hopefully most writers are stepping outside of who they are, and to do that. And, that's fun to really see, what kind of things you can make a character do.
Do you tend to get into the gore and slash sort of part of things, or is this more suspense?
I kind of run the gamut when it comes to that. My very first book is a mystery horror, and there's a lot of gore in that, just because the characters are so despicable, and it's based on a serial killer that's part of it. So I was kind of forced to show the grotesque parts of that. So there is a lot of gore. The book that I wrote recently, I kind of avoided it. I wanted to take another trip. I wanted to use horror, but do it in a different way.
At the end of the day, like when you write a book like this, what do you get out of it?
Well, I think what most people get out of it is it's cathartic in a way. It for most writers, and I definitely would say it's for me. It's almost as if you are seeing a therapist. You get a lot of your daily life. You take, you put it on the page, and you walk away like satisfied that you've accomplished something. But more than that, kind of clear your mind of the things that are kind of rattling around in there.
Well, I don't have anything rattling around.
There's no bats in your belfry?
No, it just
okay.
It's drained. It does nothing. Well, and so who are your influences? And it doesn't necessarily have to be writers. Like, do you have influences in music or in some other sort of thing?
Well, I mentioned Stephen King, but to be honest with you, in like my modern day life as a writer, Quentin Tarantino did early on, he was a big influence on me. I remember when Pulp Fiction first came out, I think it was 1994. He kind of changed the landscape of what writing was. And first thing I ever did was I bought, I guess it's a novelized version of his screenplay. And I remember reading that cover to cover and thinking, man, there is nobody, in my opinion, that can write dialogue that is, it's real, but it's super real. So I was influenced by how well and how interesting he wrote dialogue. Someone once said that if God was a screenwriter, that's how he would write the dialogue. And for me, it was true. He was an inspiration. I wanted to be a screenwriter at the time, but not only that, he knows how to tell a story.
So how do you know when it's good? Like what's good to you in horror?
Right. Yeah, that's the question, and people have it all the time. I mean, I think when you're an author, you have family and friends that say, you know what, you should tell my story. It's very interesting. And most of the time it's not.
Yeah.
Sounds
like a book signing.
Yes, exactly. And I have author friends, and we discuss it all the time, and they're like, should I do it? And I was like, listen, that's what makes a writer and everybody else a little bit different, is that we can kind of discern what we think other people will be interested in. Not everybody gets it right, and sometimes you kind of swing for the fences and put your own spin on what you love, because you could fall down a trap where you say, you know what, I really love this, but maybe not everybody is. But I think you learn really soon, especially with your readership, is what works and what doesn't.
So where do you get your characters from? Are they people you know? Are you talking about your family? And let's put some names. I want some real names.
Are you trying to get me sued?
Yeah. No, I want the names. I want where you got them from. And
hold on a second. My lawyer is on the other line.
Your lawyer's one of them, probably.
Probably. I would use that. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty bad.
No, but you go to a coffee shop, for instance, or you're hanging out and then you just see someone and the way they talk and act, and you kind of go, "Oh, that's an interesting character." Like, does it come that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think you want to explore everything around you. I mean, 9 times out of 10, the people that you're making characters are not that great of people, or they're annoying, or something stands out about them that's irritating. Those are the gold mines of characters. It's the subtle characters, the everyday man, that are more difficult to kind of mold and create. But yeah, I mean, looking around, it's easy. I mean, if you spend a half an hour watching the news or anything on TV or social media right now, I mean, the characters write themselves. I mean, they're far more interesting characters on social media alone than I could ever put on paper. So I got to come up with a story that's more interesting than my characters at some point.
Well, I'm interested too in how you write dialogue. I know writing screenplays, it's more dialogue heavy, and I'm just wondering, do you have an inner monologue? Can you hear your characters?
Yeah.
Is that how you do it?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any other way of doing dialogue than putting yourself in the place of the character, because there's going to be characters that have different cadence to them, different styles that they're going to speak. Men or women are going to speak and talk differently. So I always put myself into their character, and usually that's when I have a dialogue heavy story that I'm writing, I usually will try to finish. I don't want to take any breaks from it, because those are the things that start to fade away, is that voice of a character, if you take a little too long vacation away from a certain story or piece. So that's really the challenge for me.
Do you find it hard to separate these voices from real life?
Well, I mean, Xanax helps sometimes. No, that's usually not a problem. But I mean, definitely there are some characters that kind of live with you for a long time, especially some of the more, the more violent characters. If you write horror, you're going to write characters that have no value in life. So those are the ones that stick with you a while. And I think the side effect of doing that, really, it isn't anything diabolical, but it brings out the cynic in you. I mean, me and my family could be watching a TV show, and I'm always going to take the dark twist of what something is meaning behind it, opposed to my family, which are, of course, normal. So
yeah, they've got very few closet skeletons like you. Well, it's just interesting too, because when you release Bottom Feeders, and like you said, then there's like the lockdown, and everything's going ass backwards, as they,
right.
And so when all this is going at the same time, you put out On the Tip of Her Tongue, and then now you've got this new one that just came out here in October on the 25th, called Throwing Shadows. So
Right.
so you've managed to create two new books, and I sort of wonder if being in the pandemic has kind of contributed to the evilness of these books.
I would say I'd like to agree with you, and it sounds good to say on an interview that it did.
Well, we'll say it on air, and then you can tell me the truth.
We'll speak behind the scenes. Yeah. No, I mean, I think what we've learned from a pandemic, or at least that I feel that we've learned, is that we all go to our comfort spot, and it wasn't necessarily writing for me. It took me a long time to get back to writing. I mean, we wore out our Netflix or our streaming.
Oh, you're the guy that went to the store and bought all the toilet paper.
Yeah, I have some for sale still. I didn't mark it up anymore, but. Yeah. But yeah, so it was actually a challenge to keep writing through it all. I mean, there were too many things to occupy your time and mind, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that in different ways.
Yeah. We talked to writers, and it seemed to have either the way of totally shutting down writers, and some people were unable to really do much or very well, and others
Right.
sort of helped them. So it's kind of, it can go either way, I guess. Depends on your own personality and what affects you and stuff. And,
Absolutely. And I was surprised. One of the things that surprised me when the pandemic I thought, in my, my naive mind that, my book's coming out in 2020 and people are shut down in their house and they're going to read more than they've ever read in their life. And, all of me and my friends were going to be bestsellers in 10 days, time. And it turns out that, people did less reading than they ever have during a pandemic, which is, I don't know if it's sad or, but that was the reality that I had to come to terms with.
Well, it's just easier to turn on streaming. There's so much
True.
stuff on TV now with streaming networks that I think it's easier.
Yeah.
They don't have to think. You can
Right.
let yourself drift and not really. A book is a little bit more disciplined.
Right. I agree. Yeah. And the questions that the only question you're asked when you're watching streaming is, are you done watching this program yet?
Yeah.
Which comes up.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of, and it just varies. I mean, my books really stopped selling because I put all my books in every bathroom, you see. And
Yeah.
all the bathrooms got shut down, all the public bathrooms. So nobody could read my books. I was like, that's what I blame it on, but.
Absolutely.
So what's your structure like then? How does Jerry Roth write?
Yep.
Did you set times aside and tell everyone they're not allowed in the house and stuff like, are you real strict in your regiment and you can kind of sit down and do this planned writing, or does it just sort of hit you and you have to be in the mood and then you run into the bathroom and write down the story?
Right. Yeah. I mean, my family don't like it when I, set down times, but times are the only way I can get it done. To be honest with you, there are people who are mood writers, and those people usually don't have a full-time job and they don't have a family because it's so difficult, to be able to just, say, okay, everybody, leave me alone. I'm going to do some writing. So I usually set a good time, either late at night or early in the morning, and I give myself, here's my clock in time and a clock out time. And it makes it kind of destroys the part of me that just wants to procrastinate.
No, unless of course you've killed your family and you put them in the basement. That's really good. Great source material.
Let me write this down. What is that?
Yeah.
Well, how do you keep track of the continuity in your books? Do you have tools or any type of process?
If you happen to read Bottom Feeders, a lot of my readers tell me that it's the most complex story because there's a lot of different characters and the threads that interwoven together. But in all honesty, I am a pantser. I do not put anything down. I don't write any kind of structure. I sometimes have a glimmering idea of how that's going to end, and I start a blank slate and just let it all come out of my mind. So I have absolutely no structure, so I can't tell you. I feel like if I don't know where it's going, then my reader won't, and that's the only way I can kind of keep it fresh for them.
Well, do you find that your characters kind of take over because of that? And have they ever, just kind of just taken over the plot and taken
Absolutely.
Yeah, just painted yourself into a corner because of that?
Yeah, good characters turn bad, and then bad characters, they might have a golden heart at the end. So there's always that possibility that you can do a switch over. But the characters kind of stay where they are, but the storyline is what really can have some, I can do some damage with it. One of the books actually I just finished, a work in progress. The book was going just perfectly, and halfway through, you know what? I said, let's flip it around, and I had a whole new ending for the book, which I had no idea I was going to do. And it actually kind of frightened me because I was like, both ways were great paths to a book, but I couldn't tell which one was going to be a better book. So, those are the challenges that I enjoy. But man, when you put it on paper, you're like the writer is like the last person in control, at least the way that I do it.
Wow. Now your new book, Throwing Shadows, a Dark Collection. Now,
Right.
from what I see, this is a collection of shorter stories. So
Yeah.
what made you go that direction?
Well, like I said, I'm a child of the '80s, and when I grew up, I loved, the Tales from the Crypt or Night Gallery, if you've seen that, or some of the, the Twilight Zone. Those shorts with the twists and sometimes the scary things. Those were like those were my bread and butter. Those are stuff in that that becomes a part of you, gets under your skin, and what I wanted to do was take my love for that and kind of make a vintage feel with all these short stories so that you can just dive in. Some of them are even only 2,000 words, but I want them to have a lived in feel where you jump in, you feel what the character's going through, and you kind of go on a short journey and move on to the next one.
Wow. So where do you get your ideas from stuff like that? Or is it some thing that you notice about life or somewhere society or something around you and you kind of get irritated and you sort of make it into something?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the short stories in this book are grounded with real people. There's mothers and there's fathers and brothers and sisters, and there's different people that you wouldn't assume would have a horrible life or a horrible circumstance. But I throw these like everyday people into situations that are they're hard for them to deal with and kind of scary and frightening. But I find that that's the best way to really kind of turn up a notch on the fear factor when you're a reader.
Do you want a different outcome from short stories like this Throwing Shadows, and
Right.
and someone reads this,
Mhm.
you want them to get something different than what you're putting out, let's say, with Bottom Feeders?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely with Bottom Feeders. I guess it's a more serious outing. If you're reading Bottom Feeders, you're invested into the characters and their journey. But that's something that's going to stay with you a long time. Some of the horrific scenes, but something like this, something like Throwing Shadows. I'm also I wanted to scare you, but I also want there to be a fun factor. Something that's nostalgic. Something like if you read an old pulp novel in a day, you're not taking it too seriously, and I think that's what I was kind of trying to bring to the table.
Well, when it comes to short fiction and novels,
Right.
do you have a preference? Do you consider yourself a natural novelist or a natural short story writer, or how does that work for you?
Well, I think I guess if I was going to be pinned down, I guess I would think that I'm more of a novelist. But with a short story novel, it's kind of a labor of love that's been brewing for 20 years. One of the stories in the short story novel I was asked to do by my very first college English teacher. And it was a story about a kind of an evil ice cream man. And, 25 years later, it ended up in my book. So I wanted to kind of put a collection together of stories that were part of my journey as a writer. And most of the time when you're writing short stories, it's because there's not enough meat in it to make into a long form. So you kind of start something, you're like, I don't think this is going to be a 300-page book. So and a lot of times I would put that aside and I would say, I'll come back to that later. And maybe I would finish it and maybe I wouldn't. But over the years, they were always there waiting for me to put them into a collection.
They don't still have Ice Cream Man out there, do they?
They do, but not too many places. They do in Ohio.
Well, they probably have all sorts of things. They still have payphones there too, probably.
Only evil ice cream men.
Evil Ice Cream Man. They dress like a clown.
I think that's actually you can put that on a resume.
Evil Ice Cream Man.
Yeah, I mean that's a term you can find on monster.com.
Wow.
I want that business card.
Yeah. Doing it already. Well, but when we talk about Ice Cream Man, evil Ice Cream Man, you talk about characters like that. I always think that the things that make a character stand out, but still seem believable, but yet it's not, is when you take a behavior or a habit some sort of aspect of their personality, and
Right.
you enlarge it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you kind of blow it up in a sense so that it kind of becomes, it's almost crazy, but at the same time, that's what makes that character believable.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. That's a great point.
Yeah. So but you see, when you do the short stories, I
Hmm.
think that's the big difference. So in Throwing Shadows, when when you're doing these shorter stories, it's much
Hmm.
harder to develop that character to the point of that kind of behavior, that kind of, do you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
in a fuller book, you can go through the details and you can really emphasize their kind of kinky characteristics or weirdness
Right.
and make it
Right.
really come alive. In a short story, I imagine that's going to be a lot harder.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, there's not much room for backstory when you're talking about a short story. So you're really just digging in and you're dealing with their fears and maybe their reaction to fears or the reaction to something that bad that's going to be happening to them or happening to them. So you're kind of giving up one feature for another. So you're kind of giving up maybe like the development, the evolution of a character for just diving in, and you're in the middle of whatever, for lack of a better word, the hell that they're involved in.
Yeah. So, speed round. Do you like Frankenstein or Dracula better?
Ah, that's good. I got to go with Dracula.
Oh, there you go. Do you find older horror, let's say 60s and before that, compared to, let's say, 80s or today's date? What kind of horror turns it on for you?
I get so much, backlash when I put down another one, but I like them all. But my heart is always with the years of like the Bela Lugosi, the Lon Chaney. There's something very, I don't know, primal about those characters. Before, before you could actually see somebody get torn apart, you had to imagine it in those movies. So I'm always drawn to those early characters like the Nosferatu and things that, could this really be real? Because nowadays, with CGI, anything could be real.
Yeah, it takes the forefront now. The
It does.
slash, the gore, all the effects really
Yeah.
can kind of take you
Mhm.
away. I think
Right.
the older shows, you had to feel them,
Right.
and I was just actually, last night was just one of the, Jekyll and Hyde movies.
Oh, okay.
And it was great, in the sense that within 10 minutes, you already knew who you hated.
Right. Yeah.
Like they really expressed themselves, and you really caught it, and it was great, and when he took the serum, this was the Two Faces, so he takes
Right.
and he goes in he's dancing with some broad, and she said something, and he just slaps her and laughs, and I thought, wow, this is great.
It's the male's inhibition to be himself.
Yeah, and but they really played it. And I guess they had to, because you didn't have all that stuff around,
Right. I mean, I think it's a technique. It's like if you think about, Steven Spielberg's first film that kind of like was his popcorn film, which was Jaws. He was, because there were so many malfunctions with the shark, that he was forced to make it more, not seeing the shark, a lot of intense, a lot of, inference of what could happen, and it kind of really sparked his career in a lot of ways, because he was forced to go a different route than his normal ways. I mean, from then on, obviously, he had the technology to make anything appear on a screen, but I think that's what you get from those old movies, is you get a feeling of what could happen, a dread you don't really get in today's movies.
Yeah. There's some, and so of course, now you've seen Terrifier 2 yet?
No, I haven't seen that. I'm afraid that of what would happen to my bodily functions going into a theater. I mean, there's all kind of things that could go wrong, and I don't think, I definitely couldn't go it alone.
I'm really surprised it's made such a big splash in the world, period. I mean, it sold millions, and it's doing really well, and I'm shocked, because it just seems kind of like an all-out slash fest, which is fine.
Right.
But I'm just surprised
Right.
that it's doing so well in mainstream.
Right.
You know, I'm just kind of shocked, and I think both of us, Dave and I, have watched Terrifier 1, you know, because we had to catch in on it, and it's really awful.
Well, I mean, it's like the Friday the 13th. You know, it's not high drama when you know it's kind of like an icon in our minds for the rest of our life. Those kind of movies, but you know, if you dissect them, you know. Some of them are not so great, but you know they struck a chord maybe with a certain you know population or you know a time in our life.
I think it's this Terrifier's a self-hate thing. You know, they cut a guy's penis off and they've got a woman's draining out of her vagina, all sorts of weird stuff. I mean, there's just so many, there's so many vile things going on in this. This is like the self-hate. Let's be in the worst we can ever be, right? Like it's just really nasty.
See, I think you might be. This might be disturbing some people, but yeah, I remember when the Blair Witch came out. Remember the hype that they had, and I I can't argue it because I had a family member that I took to that movie, and they actually threw up in there. So I can't. It's probably more of the shaky cam that did it, but But I didn't want to say that. I want to keep the hype going. That it was.
Well, you know, and that you see, I think it's also where you stand, because people were saying that about The Exorcist, right? And the head spinning, and all these people were throwing up and upset, and don't let your young'uns see it and all that. And I wasn't allowed to go see it, and there was all sorts of weird stuff going on. Then it was the same thing, and I think it's the same with this. It depends on where you are on that, how much you've been exposed to, and all that stuff.
I agree,
right? I mean,
and I think it's like one of those things where, you know, there are roller coaster fanatics that want a roller coaster that's going to do even more. And is this one going to mess me up? Or, you know, and I think that people are starting to do that with horror books and with horror movies. You know, they want to push the envelope, and they want their entertainers to bring them even more. You know, so I think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. Because by the time I saw the Blair Witch, I was disappointed.
Yeah.
When I went to the theater, everybody said, "Oh, you're just not going to believe it." I was disappointed in that movie.
Yeah.
So I think it's just because of where I was at when I saw it. I thought, well, you know, come on.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it was just, you know, that's one that was definitely overhyped. And they've made more than one, too. Wow, it's crazy.
I actually thought the second one was a little better. It seemed like had a little bit more production value to the second one. So I liked the first one was, I think it was more the hype that could this be real? Because that was the hype for a while.
Yeah.
This was a real thing that they found footage. It was kind of early on in the years of found footage kind of cinema.
Yeah. And that's too bad, because they should have really done that, but they should have really hacked up the bodies or something, and then
bring cadavers in, and
now that would have really made it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyway. Well, so now, are you doing social media? Are you doing hookup sites for people? Are you do a website? Where do people find Jerry Roth?
Are you referring to like Tinder or
whatever you like? Tinder, Grindr, Slasher, Kettle of Fish, whatever those are.
You know, I'm on all the social medias, but
I thought he was going to say I'm on all of them. I was like, wow, you're a busy guy.
But if you want to get a hold of me, I have a website. You can get on jerryrotauthor.com and see about me and my books and where I'm going to be at next, and great shows like yours.
Oh, you're not talking to us.
I'm watching TV, so.
Yeah, I was going to say. Well, we'll have that up, of course, and people can find it with one click and all that. Sure. So, you know, and maybe we'll put up a phone number or two, see if you get any calls. What happens if someone with reviews? Are you a guy that kind of checks out the reviews and sees kind of what people are saying, yes or no, and you're kind of watching, and you hunt them down, kill them, and
you know, there are levels to a writer. The first level is, you know, you give them to your friends the first time you write something. You say, "Hey, do you like it?" And really what you're saying is, "Tell me I'm good, please."
Yeah.
You know, and then the next level is, you know, the editing part. Okay, it's like, can I I got to build up some skin. So an editor says that isn't right, I got to be able to listen to them to improve myself. And then finally, the third level is when you have readers who are just, they're overjoyed to tell you they don't like something. So,
Yeah.
that's the hard part. And I'm learning as I go. And I'm on to my third book, going to my fourth book. And I'm just learning now to not really pay attention. Any review is a good review, and it kind of pushes you along the stream of life, or on your little journey. So I'm okay with bad reviews. Not I think that once upon a time Stephen King said that the more bad reviews you get, you start to find your ideal writer, and I'm happy to find my ideal writer eventually. So
Yeah, but what does he know? He can't even find him on Amazon. I wouldn't listen to him. I don't think he knows what he's doing. And he sells something, maybe.
right.
With this pandemic and all this stuff going on, you see all the weird stuff, the way people act and acted over the last couple of years. You've got
Right.
the Trump thing that happens, and you got all these people throwing stuff at each other, and then you got all the conspiracies and stuff. When you think about how people acted, does that change the way you write a character, you think? Or because what I'm saying is there's real people.
Yeah.
Like if you would have wrote a character like Trump, for instance, and doing some of the stuff,
Right.
you could have said, well, that's unbelievable. That's a little bit too phony, right?
I totally agree. I've questioned that myself. We're seeing a lot of things, even in the media that we've never even encountered before. We always think of ourselves as, good citizens. But the truth is that, the pandemic has brought out it's not really brought out, but it's kind of revealed some of our biases and some of our bad sides that we always tried to hide. And now with social media on top of it, there's a lot of people that's just happy to show that side to the world. And when I'm writing, I could never compete with what I see on TV anymore. So I have to, not even try.
Yeah, because it's kind of weird to know where to draw the line.
Right.
Of what's real and what a real character would do or say and what wouldn't. It's just, sometimes I look at people and think, that's just too weird,
Yeah.
But, and then you've got Dave out there running around with the clown suit on and delivering pizza.
Halloween pizza.
Halloween pizza with pumpkin on it.
Yeah.
Crazy. It's a crazy man, Don't ever be alone with him.
No.
Well, my restraining order says I can't.
Yeah.
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 Have to stay 500 feet away.
Yeah. That's where they're. Well, Mr. Roth, I'll tell you. Well, now let's see. Now the newest book is called Throwing Shadows, and it's a dark collection. And it came out October 25th, and we're here to, we've been talking with the author, Jerry Roth, and he's been telling us about his conditions. And, well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed every second that I talked with you. And, I think you have the cynical thread in your life the way I do. So we got along very well.
And then
Thanks,
there's Dave.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.